This is the November meeting of the Jericho Affordable Housing Committee. It is 7:01. Tonight, we will be discussing our recommendations to the select board for the future of the Affordable Housing Committee and potentially updating the charter. If there's time and it seems appropriate, we will talk about any outstanding comments on DRB applications and any other business that the committee feels we need to discuss, and we will adjourn after that. Does anyone have any changes or things that they want to add to the agenda to make sure that we talk about? Okay. Hi, Frederica. Can you hear us okay? Okay, good. Okay, great. So let's start with the discussion about next steps for the housing committee. And somebody else take us away.
Well, I'll start. I think, as I explained in my message, which because it went to the entire committee is public record, we were given a task to essentially do investigations, research into the state of affordable housing in Jericho, and then to come up with recommendations for how more housing could be brought into the town, things that the town could do around that. As I look back on I guess it's going on 5 years, 4 years, something like that, that we've been in a committee, we've done quite a lot to assess the state of housing in Jericho, to identify what share of the housing is classified or would be classified as affordable based on grand list data that we were able to collect, to identify targets for growth in the volume of housing, and specifically what share of that ideally would be in the category of affordable, 80 to 120% of area median income. We've submitted that knowledge or that information to the select board and the planning commission. We've also made recommendations for adjustments to zoning regulations and permits, what's allowed in zoning regulations and what is allowed in the various districts to effectively open up the opportunities for more affordable housing, whether it's through an accessory dwelling unit or through subdividing a lot into smaller units. Planning Commission has reviewed those, and those have been incorporated into the new plans. We were, I think, somewhat essential to the railroad place property purchase. We haven't done a lot with that other than to tell the town we thought that would be appropriate for working class, whatever the right word is these days, for housing that is less than 100% of area median income. And we've kind of come to the point where, in my opinion, without a further remit that involves getting money, we really can't do much. We have pushed for the changes in the regulations. We've had them. We've identified areas where growth should occur. We've identified shortfalls in the type of housing stock we have. We've made recommendations for how we can change our regulations to potentially add up more. But I don't know what else we can do after that.
I just want to note that I'm sitting here as a reminder to myself that, damn it, I'm not chair. I'm not there, but that means that I don't have the master controls in front of me. So we will do away with raising hands. That we're all committee members here. So just interject, speak at will, and we'll all kind of we'll all kind of get ourselves through this meeting on equal footing. Okay, that said, keep going.
So my perspective is that we report to the select board on what we've done. pat ourselves on the back, say we're available if you ever want to resurrect the committee. Some or all of us may be willing to do that. So they should keep it alive as a placeholder. But either they give us a new task to do, or we say, we've done what we were asked to do. Now it's in your court. That's my perspective.
Yeah, I definitely agree that it would be nice to kind of toss it back to the select board and see what they want from this committee. You know, given everything like that you just said. I think the only thing that, you know, I'm like looking at all of our tasks. I think the pieces around culture change are a little bit ambiguous and hard to measure, but that would be something that hasn't necessarily happened in the town. I suppose in terms of the, you know, planning commission maybe, but you know, the barriers to people getting on board and stuff is still, you know, even just the idea that we have to change it to housing and not affordable housing because that's too controversial is a little bit disappointing to me. But otherwise,
Changing the population makeup of Jericho is a decades-long process.
oh, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like the people that are here now, just the idea of what is coming. It's, you know, I feel like we've had a lot of discussions around how we can't like upset the stakeholders, you know, so that piece, like the advocacy piece feels like it's not finished, not that it ever would be. And I don't know what that looks like.
And I think part of that has to do to some degree with my leadership and my resistance to being disruptive. But I do think that, which is, I want
Resistance to being what?
being disruptive.
Yeah.
But but I did you just want to get me to say that again, Chuck? But I do think, I mean, I do think that that's one of the reasons why changes in leadership are important. And I agree that we as a committee have, I think, gained a certain amount of trust and respect, and that you know, political capital that we could now be leveraging to be more, to advocate more strongly for some of those things. I 100% hear that. One of the questions I have is that, and I think that this is where the conversation will eventually end up, is there a place for that in a committee like this that is run out of town hall? But yeah, go ahead, Frederica, where are you at?
Yeah, so I generally always agree with everybody as they're speaking. It always sounds good. I don't know, that's my tendency, but so I like structure. So I think that, you know, as far as structure is concerned, I'm hearing like different visions of what our next steps as a committee are. And one vision is we're basically at a point where we can't do anything anymore without a new charge or without, you know, without a new relationship with the board or with, you know, actually we can't do very much beyond what we've done because what we've done hasn't really been implemented. And it's basically the ball is in the select board's court to really take the next steps. And I kind of agree with that. I think that's very convincing. That's also, it's not just a way to say, okay, well, we're done and we're walking away. It's really a way to say, we've come to this point, and now there have to be some steps that are taken. It can't be that we just turn around and cyclically produce housing reports without anything ever being done about it. So I agree with Eric's basic approach to say, okay, this is what we've done, and right now it's in the hands of the select board. And then I'm hearing a second goal, which is what SJ and Chuck have been kind of going back and forth about a little bit, which is, if we get charged with, if the select board wants to revive the housing committee, would we recommend a different structure for it? And I think those two things those two goals can coexist. I mean, we can do what Eric said, and then we can also in the same breath say, okay, and if you want more from the housing committee, we suggest that, the charter be revised. As far as the advocacy piece is concerned, I think we participated in things like this big, community meeting where people all came together to inform the town plan. We participated. We went to the farmers market. We went to all the town meetings. So we've been present. And I think that changing the culture of a place that is made up of a certain number of residents, to allow other residents, the logical problem with that is that the people with a voice are the residents that are here right now, and not the ones that would be moving in. So it is, I think that to me is a big limit to advocacy, that the folks that are here already don't have the same interest as the people that want to move in necessarily. So we are, so they don't have a voice in this. And we've tried to give them a voice in what we've been doing, but when ultimately the town plan is done by with input from the residents, what's missing is input from the people that would be moving in here. And I don't think we can overcome that.
Well, I'm not ready to throw in the towel. In my summary of at least the time I've been on the committee is that we spent a lot of time trying to craft some recommendations, which we submitted to the select board and the planning commission in the summer of 2023. That was hard because we had a diversity of opinion, but with SJ's leadership, we were able to put together, a set of recommendations that neither the planning commission nor the select board responded to. And there were some, fairly profound observations that, came from a committee that the select board created to get recommendations from, that neither body responded to. We then proceeded to put together a set of recommendations for implementing the direction that we discussed in the summer of 2023, and submitted them 9 weeks ago. And we've reminded the select board a couple times since then that they have a set of recommendations that they need to respond to, and they haven't done it. We've been more focused on the select board than the planning commission, because I think I certainly have, because I feel like we were created by the select board, and they're the only ones that really can respond to our recommendations. I think our role is to continue on the same track and do what we can to insist that the select board consider and respond to the recommendations that this committee has diligently put together and given to them. The town has done absolutely nothing for the last 35 months. There has been no change, no action taken by the town since January of 2022. to make it easier to build a house for a low or middle income person in Jericho. There's been no change, no zoning change, no nothing. A lot of talk and, a lot of plans. And I think our job is to, I mean, the select board has about 8 weeks to announce their direction on wastewater based on the resolution they signed with us in June of 2023. Our job is to make sure they're aware of that deadline. I think to just fold up the tent. I mean, you sort of make recommendations, you just sort of, the idea that we just sort of pass 3 pages of paper and then think that we've done something. I mean, that's just not how to get stuff done. So, if this is a time for turnover on the committee, I mean, if people think that the work is done, then it's going to be hard to do more work. But, I feel like we still have a lot to do.
I think we're not necessarily
And
saying
our
different
voice,
things.
is unique and different from the voice of either the planning commission or the select board right now.
Would you agree though, Chuck, that the select board has to invest funds, has to put together a budget, has to put money on the line to actually make changes when it comes to
Oh,
things like
right now, the cost of a permit and the impact fees for a 1,500 square foot triplex, which can only be built in a small part of town, is more than double what it would be for a 20,000 square foot house. That's a change that the select board can make, and that's one of the recommendations that we made, 9 weeks ago. We can make zoning changes to permit multifamily housing that has less impact than the luxury homes that we currently have been preferring in other places in Jericho. I mean,
yeah,
there
but
are,
those are all things that we've said, that we've
and we
told
need
them.
to say, right, and we say,
And it doesn't make a lot of sense to keep saying it unless they actually do something. So I think Eric's move is to say, it's your turn to do something.
yeah, which is something that, we need to say, we need to keep saying. I mean, the select board is um, uh, um, put on the agenda for the last meeting and then took it off, discussing the recommendations that we made in September. And I think the reason that the reason it made it that close is because they have been reminded during public comment over the last couple of months that they have a job to do in terms of responding to us. If we had stayed silent, we stayed silent in 2023 and did not insist on a response to our recommendations. And you talk to the select board, a couple months later, and I mean, Eric, it was like, you sent us recommendations. Can you send them to me again? I've sent them to Peter, both sets multiple times.
Yeah, it's just isn't saying, okay, we're not going to do anything anymore unless you do the next step. Is that more of a move than to just keep saying, hey, we're still waiting for your response? I think it's
I mean,
yeah.
this gets to my fear, which is I understand why it makes sense and why it's tempting to put the ball in the select board's court. But if we do, all evidence up till now points to the fact that they won't do anything. And I think that is my hesitancy with the idea of closing this until the select board wants to reinstate it or reopen it. I think that if we do that, then it won't happen. At least it won't happen without one of us pushing the select board to do something about it.
I mean, they passed out the contract for doing the wastewater study. They were more than happy when the thing passed the 2-year mark. It was finally when, we started going into their meetings, every meeting saying, where is it? And, basically challenging them to call the management of the engineering company to find out where the heck it was. I mean, the reason it took almost 2.5 years was because no one was on their case.
So, let me,
I mean, Montgomery got feasibility studies done for 2 village centers. Uh, they have they don't even have a town administrator, and they got it done in 9 months.
so I
And
think that, the place that we are right now is, I think that Eric's letter is right in that we have accomplished the big kind of duties that were assigned to us when we were first established. And I think that we're all feeling a little bit of, we're spinning our wheels, we're doing kind of busy work. We need some more guidance, and or we need some projects that have some teeth. No. Both of those things together suggest to me that whatever this current iteration of the housing committee is, has kind of come to some sort of conclusion. However, I believe very strongly that Chuck is right, that the particular, I won't call us experts, but the particular knowledge that we all have, the particular point of view that we all have is unique to this committee and is necessary to keep the conversation going and to keep some kind of pressure on the town to move on these things.
our mission is the Affordable Housing Committee's mission is to increase the availability of affordable housing in order to support a more diverse, vibrant, and inclusive committee by lowering economic, racial, and social barriers to living in Jericho. It's our
And that's
mission.
a mission.
Our mission is to get something accomplished. It's not just to get a term paper.
Exactly. Let me finish my thought, and then you all can
Sure.
keep
Sure.
going. So there's two things then. Three things. One is, in the absence of a committee, or in the case in which we close and wait for the select board to happen, I think that we lose ground and we run the risk of there never being whatever the next step is for a group like ours. Two, there are a list of kind of duties that a committee like ours, that our committee has agreed to, one of which is producing a housing report every year for this 5-year period for the housing resolution. There is another, I will say, the select board is dangerously close to doing something since January 2022, which is finally putting together a policy where they won't take on public roads if an HOA is exclusionary. And what came up in their last select board meeting was, okay, well, who's going to review the bylaws to determine whether there are exclusions in the bylaws for these HOAs where that are applying for a road? And someone threw out, well, maybe we can ask Chris Flynn to do it. Somebody else said he's already overworked. I wonder, do we want Chris Flynn doing that? That seems like an easy deliverable that a committee like ours can do, kind of in a, let's call it a hibernation, or in a partial, taking a partial leave, committing to the housing report that we already said we would do, and committing to reviewing the HOAs of developments that are asking the town to take over roads. And I would add to that, committing to having some kind of checklist available, which would probably be the same thing that we would use for the roads, to assess the HOAs for DRB applicants that come in and do some kind of, I guess Chris Flynn is agreeing that we are a committee that exists that applicants should come and talk to now. So we could have those 3 tasks be things that we as a committee are ready and willing to do. And, you know, we will plan to meet 4 times a year to that end, and then we'll meet more frequently if the select board tasks us with something or if a need arises or whatever. The other reason I think it's important for us to stay together as a recognized group is so that the town will pay for us to go to conferences and continue to do have opportunity to gather information that we can bring back to the town and network and make connections and do some of those things. It means that the town will pay those bills. And sure, they would pay that for a planning commission member or a conservation commission member who wants to go to a housing conference, but it's another way, I think, of keeping us on the radar. And then the last thing I'll say is that while I do think it's important that we make a recommendation to keep some version of the housing committee alive and maybe in a pared down version than what our current charter looks like. I really think that we need to do that because in the absence of leadership, and I recognize that I'm the person saying this, but in the absence of real leadership, there's a vacuum here that our committee will flail and fizzle out if we don't have a leader with some vision to, because the select board isn't going to tell us what to do. We need to have ideas about what we think is important, where we need to put our energy and resources, and how we're going to do that. And without a leader who's pushing for those things, and quite honestly, a committee with all 7 members being willing to actively participate in doing those things, then we shouldn't try to be that. So I think that what is interesting about thinking about what next steps might be, I've listed the kind of ongoing responsibilities that either we're committed to or I think we could easily commit ourselves to. The question about advocacy comes up, and I think it's a good one. One of the places where if, and I understand it's a huge if the select board decides to move forward on wastewater, the PR campaign and the advocacy that wastewater program is going to need is something that we should be really getting behind and pushing. It's something that a committee like ours could do and could warrant a 7-member committee meeting monthly. Is that outside of our scope? I don't know. Is it something the select board wants us to do? They would have to tell us to do something like that in order to do it because we'd be advocating on behalf of the town. But it's a big project that is intimately tied to our mission and our goals. I love what you're saying, Frederica, about being a voice for the people who have not yet been able to move here. And we've talked about it a lot, and I think we still need to talk about it. And then there's the other piece, which is in terms of advocacy, which is what you're bringing up, Chuck, which is holding their feet to the fire. And whether or not, again, that is, if holding their feet to the fire in the way that you do, Chuck, is going to be a primary focus of this committee, I believe our committee will be dissolved. And so while I think holding their feet to the fire is important, we need to figure out how to do that in a, we got to find that balance between being disruptive and using the political capital that we've gained and not, you know, what saying fits there? Cutting off our nose to spite, no, not that one. I don't know. Put in whatever is appropriate. I don't want us to burn up all that capital.
Not biting the hand that feeds you.
Not biting the hand that feeds you, right? And so when we think about advocacy for this group, I think we've done a really good job of educating. I think we could more aggressively advocate for the voices, for the people who haven't yet been able to move here. I think we haven't done a good enough job on that front. And even though it's a difficult one, I think it's something that we should be doing more of and could be doing more of. And we should be doing more of the holding the feet to the fire. But that advocacy piece is a piece that I think is up for debate. Like it sounds like some of the people in this room feel strongly that needs to happen and that is a role for our committee. And I think some people in the room feel like, or let me take that back. I think I've also heard that the select board, if they want us to be devoting this much of our time and our resources to this, the select board needs to take a little more ownership and give us a little more direction.
SJ, I picked up two, what I think are reasons to potentially change the function and frequency with which the Affordable Housing Committee meets. The first one is the taking on a role in assessing any additional subdivision applications and HOAs to at least be the third set of reviewers who are looking to make sure there are no prohibitions against accessory dwelling units. There are no prohibitions against some in-home operation. Now, part of what's being done in the current restructuring of the character-based zoning will address at least the home occupations to a certain level, but it doesn't address anything about an HOA that says you cannot subdivide, you cannot put in an accessory unit, you cannot. And
But that's just for the village centers, isn't it?
at present, yes, but it will likely be extended to the entire town because that's the way the planning commission wants things to go. The problem I have with it is I don't think we have an awful lot of those developments coming in. So at best, we're nibbling around the edges. Now, if we wanted to be more effective, again, we would have to go to the select board for this. We could identify a way to get funding so that existing HOAs can amend their laws and allow accessory dwelling units to go in. As I've said in planning commission, I'll say it here too, most HOAs do not have excess wastewater capacity for additional bedrooms. That's just the way they were built. But if we want to look forward to 5, 10, or 20 years when we do have wastewater in town, this would be a time to put those building blocks in place. I also thank you for reminding the importance of the annual housing report of what's being built in Jericho as a way to remind both the select board and the rest of the town just how few buildings are being put up every year. In the 70s, in the 80s and early 90s, we had a fair amount of housing coming up. Somewhere around about, it was like 95, and Chuck would know the number better than I do. Somewhere before the turn of the year 2000, we stopped building, and we haven't picked back up.
They were much more densely organized
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, well, we made it easier for you to have a 20, 30 unit development than it is now. But planning commission is working to change that. So on that side of it, making it easier by zoning regulations, we're going in that direction. Building them, I don't know, but the annual housing report does show what the shortfall is in the housing we need. So those would be two functions that the committee could morph into, be less frequent meetings, but the meetings would not be necessarily scheduled because the DRB would have an HOA put in front of them and we'd want to look at it right away. The annual report, again, that would be once a year, done in December, January. Not a huge push for people to do things. I don't know if
Eric?
that's enough to justify a committee. Yes, Frederica.
I think the HOAs come pretty late in the DRB process, is the impression I get.
And the town has very little to say over them. It's a contract between
But
private.
what is, we have an example of a,
We have an HOA
a
that's in
group that
place.
wants their road taken over. And we need their 3 or 4 bylaws to be reviewed and a recommendation to be made about whether or not their bylaws are exclusionary, which parts of their bylaws are exclusionary, and so that the town can say, no, we're not taking over your public road because you don't allow this, that, and the other thing. And then it's in their court to then, change their HOAs. But that review needs to happen. And
that happened. Basically what the select board has decided is that we're not going to take over a road unless the road is 100% subject to town zoning regulations.
correct. And then the discussion.
But we got this far because we were in their face at half a dozen select board meetings pushing. It never would have come up otherwise.
I agree.
And they would have dropped it.
Have already on the table the HOA regulations for the development in Riverside, which, for example, prohibit using a garage for anything other than a garage. It's already in that text.
Right.
So they do come up. The question is, if we raise it, would the town say, we're going to stick to it? You can't do that. Or are we going
Well,
to
and that
rely on
speaks to
individual?
hold their feet to the fire that Chuck is promoting. And again, I do think that maintaining, even if we're on call, if we're in the reserves, maintaining some level of expertise and engagement is important. And we had talked about at one point wanting to make sure that we had planning commission members and conservation commission members and energy task force folks on the committee. And so if the committee is made up of folks who are engaged in other things as well, and they're engaged in those other committees from the perspective of housing, and they're going to the regional housing conference and they're doing this, that, and the other thing. And then we all come together as a group 4 times a year or as needed to do these things. When a project does arise, when the wastewater PR campaign needs to go into kickoff, or when some huge whatever happens, and we're ready to step up and amp up our commitment, then, we're ready to come in and get down to work. Or if the JCDC decides that they're going to do something with railroad property and want to call us in, or, there's a gazillion possibilities and roles, potential roles that we can play that I think dissolving the committee makes it far less likely that a group will do that work. So I'm hesitant to dissolve the committee. I think in where I'm standing, we take the first half of Eric's letter, keep the first half of Eric's letter, and the second half of Eric's letter is a recommendation for the next chapter, which is we'll take off affordable, it'll be the housing committee. And, you meet, I would love to say we meet 4 times a year. One of those meetings is with the select board, the planning commission, and maybe a representative from the school board. That meeting is sometime around when the housing report comes out so that we can talk about what we found and, where everybody's at. We have a big Jericho-wide housing convening. And we commit to those couple of things that we've talked about, and otherwise leave it to organically develop into whatever the next phase is going to be if it's bigger than that. Except I'm hearing a real desire in the room for maintaining a full committee and having advocacy be a larger role of that committee.
One thing I'm thinking is, I mean, there are some pieces of homework that you've brought up, and there's these 2 pieces of homework that I did on the DRB that were kind of late, I think but they showed me while I was writing them out that there actually are repeating themes in there, and even if it's not a checklist, it's not hard to apply everything that we've learned to these DRB reviews. So that's something that I think is going to keep coming up, and it's going to be, I'm happy to do those, but it's going to have to be something that somebody looks at, that the committee looks at, if we are going to keep doing our work in the committee. And so like that, and then there's the housing report that has to happen annually. I'd really like the idea of a maybe semi-annual or annual larger Jericho housing convention or meeting. I like that idea, pulling other people in, but just in order to set that up and prepare that is going to take effort and probably coordinated effort. So if we do something like that, we're going to need to meet more than just once every 6 months at that point, right? So I think what we also need, if we're going to keep this going, we could step back and do it at lesser frequency and keep doing our homework in the background. Some of us go to the select board meetings, and some of us do the TRB reviews and whatever else comes up. The liaison with other statewide agencies is another piece. And then we convene, say, quarterly. That would be, I think we've thought about that way of doing it, but we do need more members. And, I don't know if we can do this. As you said, I don't know if we can do this without having leadership on the committee. So that's kind of an impediment as well.
Rodriga, can you talk a little bit more about either how much, like what did you learn from doing those DRB reviews? So maybe it's not a checklist, but is it an hour per application? Is it once you get yourself set up and you know what you're looking for, like if we make it more of a streamlined process, it might be, 30 minutes per application. What do you think?
Oh, it was, one of the things that I found out is it's really useful to use the housing report that you put together, the criteria in there for housing that is potentially affordable. I forget what the terminology was. The NOAA, naturally occurring affordable housing, was kind of a list of items that you could basically check against the plan. So that was really useful. And then the rest of it is really going into the particular plans that they've laid out. And you just have to read through them. And yeah, it took me some time. It took me probably probably an hour per.
Are you reviewing the whole application or just the bylaws for the HOA?
I did not see bylaws for the HOA in these. Neither of them
Okay.
had those. One of them, the Governor Peck one, they're looking to just sell lots, right? So, and they're in order to get in order to get their density bonus, they had to pick from a list of qualifications. And one of them would have been committing to affordability, and the other one was committing to energy efficiency. And they found that to be easier, so they went with the energy efficiency. And so then you can comment, it's too bad that you did. And you can also, another thing that comes up is, the ADU, the conditions, the septic, the recommendation to make the septic large enough for potential ADUs. So I mean, you see what I did. I did a summary, and yes, I went through all the applications. And again, they didn't have an HOA yet, but they said the final HOA would contain the energy efficient mandate. So they put that in there in order to get the density bonus. And that was the Governor Peck one.
So it would
Um,
also be enough then to make recommendations for what the HOA includes from a housing perspective.
Yeah, so I made that recommendation, and I said what the applicants can do, just like they committed to requiring energy standards in the HOA covenant, they can commit to requiring sufficient septic capacity to allow for an ADU or multi-unit dwelling or condo. And so a design of all septic systems to allow for ultimate addition of one or two bedrooms to the originally planned dwelling. So I actually went into their plan and I looked at their septic layout, and the same thing for the one there in Riverside, where they've pre-specified how they're gonna have how many units they're actually designing their septic for, and kind of suggest that you add to that. But these are suggestions, so I don't know what's gonna happen with that.
I mean,
I think-
I think it's good to keep an eye on the DRB, but the bottom line is we're looking at a development, in some cases enormous or very large developments where multifamily housing is illegal. It's like we're somewhat coming after I mean, and the DRB is sort of limited in terms of, their job is to make sure that the development conforms to the regulations and,
Of course, but if we have the opportunity,
I'm saying we should do it, but it's hardly the heart of what,
at once.
of what we could accomplish.
But the other thing that you brought up, Frederica, which I think is a good point, is moving towards this new whatever. It means that we each need to be willing to take on a responsibility, and kind of carry that and be in charge of that, until we've got leadership, or that's just the new operating for the committee. There's a subgroup of people or a person who says, yep, I've got the DRB, I'll keep my eyes on that and I'll pull in help if I need it. Somebody else says, yep, I'm gonna keep pushing on these priorities and making sure that we're getting the responses we need from the select board and or the planning commission. Yep, I'm gonna do the housing report. And yeah, I'll start thinking about putting together the big meeting.
So almost, it becomes an ad hoc committee where we meet, maybe not twice a year, maybe once a quarter. And just touch base. Here's what we're seeing, here's what we're learning, here's what's coming up, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
Maybe in the September type meeting is to think, okay, how are we gonna put together the housing report? What are we gonna tell everybody is the state of affordable and all housing in Jericho at this point? How many have been built? What are the requirements? What has been done to change the nature of the housing in terms of allowing accessory dwelling units, in terms of allowing multiple buildings or multiple dwelling units on a single lot as part of their construction in terms of promoting sewer in the city, in the town, which is crazy. We need to think about doing that, but should have been done years ago. And that makes it possible for us to remain as a committee with a very loose leadership function, and to accomplish our required duties, which is submitting the annual report, but also to have direct impact onto, I guess, the attitudes, the atmosphere towards affordable housing by looking at HOAs, by looking at applications, permit applications for subdivisions, and being a voice that says, by the way, where's the income variation on who can buy this property? Will it change anything? Maybe.
Well, I think it keeps us going until we have a clear future and a clear mandate.
But in order to get a clear future and mandate, we should then include continual, this is what we saw this year, this is what we'd like to see next year.
Mhm.
Here are changes we believe that the select board or the planning commission or somebody else should be making in order for Jericho to continue to meet or come close to meeting its housing goals. And we did put up housing goals. They were accepted by the select board.
Yeah.
Select board is, to paraphrase Chuck, unlikely to do anything about it. So we're not empowered as a committee to do anything about it, other than scream into the wind, which I'm not real popular with doing. I'd rather like to see something happen. So that's the gap I'm trying to bridge, is how do we go from, yes, there's all these things we could do that would support our mission, but it feels like ringing the phone and nobody's picking up.
Mhm.
And that's demoralizing.
Yeah,
Now,
sure is.
so things that we can do with or without a committee, we can certainly be a voice in the DRB and to any other part of the planning commission and to the zoning office, saying this DRB, this HOA, this development does not have any contingency for what would be additional housing units or lower priced housing units within it. We think it should. Will it work? I don't know, but at least we'll feel good that we did something.
Mhm.
So I'm in favor of doing that. I think I'm in favor of keeping the annual report coming out.
If
I
we,
will go,
if,
at our next PC meeting, I will talk about how, when we're looking at zoning, we should make sure that the rules say affordable, accessory dwelling units can't be put into any HOA or must be put into any HOA that comes forward. I'll probably get voted
which
down.
is a big deal because that means septic capacity.
It means you build septic capacity, and we should be very, very cognizant that in doing that, we are effectively increasing the per unit cost of housing. Somebody's got to carry the cost.
Yeah, we're not allowed to require them to accept ADUs. But we
But it
can, but we
Could be one
can,
way to
we
do a density bonus.
Yeah.
And, looking at the incentive structure, but you're right, Chuck.
in the current, and I mean, we can also agree, and the town has just agreed to withhold, taking over the road, from, new communities or any community that exempts itself from zoning regulations. We could say that, no community with those kinds of HOA requirements should have access to any wastewater project. Like, what's the point of us providing wastewater to a community that's decided it's not going to have any additional housing?
That could very well impact the ability of the town to afford the wastewater if we exclude, say, all of Jericho East and all of Griswold from being in there because none of them want to get that going in. That's a significant baseline for what's going to pay for that.
Right.
So
So
should
that's a negotiation. That is, you know, they're not, nobody's going to sign up unless they really want it or need it. So I agree with you, Eric, but they're not, they're not going to get any new customers in Jericho East unless people in Jericho East really need it. And if they really need it, then they'll be willing to negotiate on their
talking
exclusion.
chicken and egg, it's chicken and egg. They don't need it now. They're not going to pay for it. If they don't pay for it, we're not going to get it. We have to, as a
And we're
town,
also not going to extend it to them if they don't want it.
and if we don't extend it to them, it becomes less viable for the town overall.
But
The minute you start excluding 25, 30,
extending wastewater to a neighborhood that doesn't accept it does nothing to make it more affordable.
it does because you've got economies of scale and you've got additional ratepayers paying into it.
No, well,
You're not
that's if they want it and you have additional ratepayers. I'm suggesting that a place like Jericho East, you're not going to have additional ratepayers unless people want it. And
Yeah,
if
I mean, what Eric is saying is that the people that currently live in Jericho East would be the additional ratepayers.
only if they sign up for it. They currently have septic systems. They have
Right.
they have to put up the money, dig the trench, and hook up to it, and start
Mm.
paying a monthly bill where right now they have no bill. So you can build it to Jericho East, but you may have zero customers. So at that point, it doesn't add economy of scale, it reduces economy of scale. If, on the other hand, you were to extend it to Jericho East and a bunch of people would sign up for it, they would sign up for it because they need it. And if they need it, then you have something to negotiate with in terms of their HOA, which, but I don't think they have one that's the prohibitive, but
I know that my neighborhood is. And I know that our neighborhood at 30 plus years is going to need a new leach field. And that new leach field is going to cost way more than getting on septic, than getting on town sewer.
exactly. So that means the town has some negotiating power over getting you to change your HOA. It's because you need it.
Actually,
I'd rather-
the septic plan that they were favoring, that the consultants were favoring, still had, it was like a split system where you still had a unit at your house. And then you have a pipe going for part of it, right? So what you build at your house is still gonna be determining to some extent, I would think, the number of units.
Tank in
that
your
you
house,
need.
and the leach field will be
At the school.
somewhere down, somewhere else. That's how some of them, my neighborhood, the septic is down in where the leach field is. So we have regular sewage all the way down to there. Jericho East, I don't know. I suspect that they have common septic. But I don't know.
Yeah, they have common water. I don't believe they have common septic, but I could be wrong. It was built.
But we're off topic.
The other thing that you brought up, Frederica, is membership. And I have a small list of folks that are interested or that I could nudge. And we could certainly put it out there and see if we've got some interest. And I guess I'm saying that because I do think that we can fill these seats. I feel wrong, asking people until we've had this meeting. The other thing is most terms end and begin, or end in March and begin in April. And so that's when all of the terms end and begin, unless you're filling somebody's seat. So thinking just in just having that date in mind, that there could naturally be some turnover in March. And the other thing I was gonna say, shoot, membership, March. It's gone. It'll come back.
Reimagining town meeting perhaps? Nothing with town meeting? Trying to jog your memory there.
No, I mean, the other, no, I don't, we don't need to go there. So I think where I'm kind of at now is I think that we have a loose idea of something to hold us over until we fill our ranks and find leadership. Do other people feel like we're starting to circle? Are there some folks who still feel strongly that we should just end it and dump it in the select board's lap and say, this is your problem now? I mean, that's not actually what you were saying, but.
I appreciate what Chuck is saying, that if we just do that, the select board is gonna go, thanks a lot, see you later, bye.
Mhm.
Which is kind of disappointing. But I do feel fairly strongly that at this point, without us having a way to push for the investments, we're kind of at not an impasse, but we're jammed up. We're in a logjam. We need to find a way to break through that. And we have a couple of ideas that will keep us going along if we need to.
Mhm.
But I don't know how we get to the other side of the logjam where we become, in one way or another, empowered to actually put action in place around affordable housing. Whether it's going out and recruiting Evernorth to come in and build something here because we found a lot of land, which would be nice to do, but we don't have the authority to buy it. We don't have the authority to go to somebody else and say, here's this railroad circle property. It's ripe. Will you come here and develop it? Which would be something we could potentially extend our rights or our authorization to do, but I don't see the select board giving that to us anytime soon.
And Eric,
So-
Eric is describing some kind of big projects. There's stuff that is much lower to the ground. I mean, we have someone who wants to permit a cluster of fourplexes along Route 15, and we've known it since the beginning of June, and it requires a very simple change in the zoning regulations, a 5-minute hearing in the front of two planning commission meetings and 2 select board meetings, and it's done. And we're simply unable to get it done. There's changing there's just some really simple things. The biggest impacts that we're going to have are not going to be projects costing a lot of money. They're going to be, in the short term anyway, short term meaning the next 10 or 15 years, is most of the things don't involve a lot of money.
So Chuck, this place, this fourplex on Route 15, why isn't that in front of the planning commission?
You tell me.
I've never heard it. It's never been presented to us. It's never been even suggested to us.
Susan, I've been to the planning commission and talked about it. It might have been one of the times that you were away. It's section 5.6 that says anything that has more than a duplex on it requires double the land. So the change in the 3-acre zone to allow threeplexes 3 years ago is basically void because it takes 6 acres to build a triplex of any size in the 3-acre zone. Susan and Catherine knew this back in 2022. There's been a lot of correspondence from a developer, a local, well-respected developer.
I know I'm not chair, but yes.
And the point I'm trying to make is that is a larger point, which
It
is
is a sensitive part of the topic, yeah, the zoning change.
something like this that requires us just kind of lifting a finger and giving a darn. We could get it done. It doesn't involve any money. And there's a lot of things that don't require any money that could have a short-term impact.
So in terms of a housing committee role there, because for whatever reason, planning commission leadership has not been willing to bring this forcefully to the table, we could draft up the language and hand it to them on a silver platter.
It would be,
That would be a zoning change, and it would kind of go along with what we've proposed all this time, right? Which is to permit multifamily housing everywhere. And add it in with the land restriction would be an additional.
and to assist, and to, and I
We
mean,
can spend all night coming up with ideas for things that we could do. I've got a long list of them. I'm sure everybody does. The point of this meeting is to figure out what happens next month and the month after that.
I'm just responding to Eric's view
So I'm not
that
yet.
nothing can happen because there's no money. And that's an exaggeration of what you said, Eric, but that basically money is not an obstacle right now to progress. There are many ways to make progress right now that don't involve money.
Okay, so at the end of this meeting, what I'm thinking, I'm hearing is, whereas I was thinking, let's come in and rewrite the charter for them. I don't think we're at that stage yet. But I think where we are at is, Rodriga, I remembered the other thing. The other thing, well, I'll come back, that I won't forget. So let me come back to this before I forget it. To meet open meeting law, I think we could double check, but if we were to, as a committee in open meeting, approve template language and a template standard, then I think that you could review and provide recommendations without having to come in public meeting and have us all vote on it. Do you know what I mean?
And I have that. I mean, yes, I agree. I was thinking about the meeting law as well, in kind of limiting what I can do with homework here.
Yeah, so I
I kind of have the template there. It's like a rough template, but it's a template. It's basically a summary of the proposal, an assessment that takes into account how much it permits naturally occurring affordable housing, and then a recommendation. And the recommendation for both of these that was like specifically, is there an HOA covenant? Is there anything that prohibits ADUs? Is there room for septic capacity that's built into the plan? Does it include does the HOA include minimum square foot sizes for any dwelling? Does the HOA prohibit renting out any part of the dwelling? Is there a prohibition on multifamily housing in addition to what zoning may and then the final one was, does it contain any other language that discriminates against or discourages middle or lower income residents? So the template is there. If you guys take a look at what I did with the Governor Peck one, that it should be attached to the agenda, I think, then you can see the structure. And if you say that structure works, then I can use it. We don't need another meeting. I can go ahead and use this.
maybe we can approve this one and then if we want to edit a future one to include different things, we can do that too. Is it attached? I didn't attach it. Did you attach it, Frederica?
No, but it was part of the agenda, right?
It was part of the agenda and I just didn't.
What
just
can I
didn't-
do? Can I send it now?
Sure, send it now, no share. Okay, so that was one thing, was just to say, I was thinking about, okay, well, if we don't meet again for a couple of months, does that hold us up? And I think we can get around open meeting law by doing this, making sure that we're all in agreement on the language and the criteria.
And we can have meetings in electronic format. We can write each other memos, and that is subject to open meeting law. Well, it's discoverable.
We can't, yeah, we can't make any decisions, right? Or
Can't
can we?
So,
No, never forget what I said.
Okay.
It's wrong.
Forgot. Okay, so coming back to where I was going, so I think that where we're at is editing, building off of Eric's letter. To say that we are kind of regrouping, decreasing the amount that we're meeting. We're focusing on these 2 or 3 kind of action items. And we, maybe anticipate some changes in the future, and we're really open to their input and ideas on that. But in the meantime, this is where we're at.
Well, we're waiting for them to respond to our recommendation.
Yeah, we want them to. I think that part of Eric's letter was written that way, that we made these recommendations and we could, instead of just saying, and we feel that the next step is to secure funding, we could say, well, the next step is to, follow through on the recommendations and commit funding.
To engage, we're prepared that we want to engage with you on the recommendations. You created us to make recommendations to you. We have made a set of recommendations, and we're basically not going to do a whole lot until you meet with us.
Well, we're gonna do,
Those recommendations could generate, some important things for us to do.
right. And we are
Okay.
going to keep doing our homework, which is the housing report and the DRB thing and whatever else
All
I
right,
think our
edit.
homework is.
They need to get a little bit of a flavor that we're not happy with them. It's like, we did a bunch of work twice and submitted it to you, and you're not responding. You created us to provide recommendations to you. You have them. You've had them, and you have them, and you have them.
And it says, yeah, and Eric wrote that it requires action from the select board. So that's, I think, again, I think that was a good way to do that.
Okay, so what actions or what recommendations are we?
The ones that you gave them in September.
The
You-
ones that Eric summarized them, right? I mean, the ones that he lists above.
No,
There-
there's a list of 10, there's 10 recommendations that
Yeah, but, yeah,
SJ gave the select board. It was on, I think, maybe 3 slides. Very concise list. They received them as a to-do list or as a list. Thanked SJ for the recommendations. It was, stuff having to do with multifamily housing and the cost of permit fees and redoing the PUDs to be a little more energetic about encouraging smaller units. I can't remember, there was like 10 of them, 10 recommendations. They're the ones that I've copied several times and taken to select board meetings.
Okay.
It's a, you know, it's a really, it's a really good set of recommendations.
What other,
And the most significant recommendation that we made in the summer of 2023 or June of 2023 is we are not going to accomplish our housing goals in, 4% of Jericho. And we have to look we have to look town-wide. And the recommendations that we made, basically respond to that.
what else, I can't, I need help editing this.
The other
So,
thing is the housing resolution, right? Because that's basically
I think we can add it later, but we can put in a date presented by the housing committee to the select board on September, blah, blah, blah.
I think, what you're at is just sort of pending additional charges from the select board. The Affordable Housing Committee will remain at your service
Yeah, something like that.
and will take action to how do we phrase it? We want to basically have a role in being a part of DRB reviews of HOAs and applications for development to represent the voice of all Jericho residents or of a variety of income levels, of diverse income level for home purchasers with diverse income levels. I'm trying to say, without saying, represent the voice of people who can't afford to live here, but saying represent the voice of people
how
who
about
can't
just
afford to live here.
reviewing for,
Inclusionary rules, yeah. Well, yeah,
um, let's say.
yeah.
Okay, I don't know how to make that sound pretty.
It's a private road. Take over their private roads.
Do we want to include anything about coordinating an annual meeting?
Yes. Um,
DRB. You want the DRB?
you had somebody else in there before.
School board, I've been talking
School
with
board.
Edie.
Oh, okay.
How to kind of get the school board looped into what we're doing, and she was like, I can't commit to much, but we could definitely commit to at least an annual meeting, or meeting twice a year.
Just without anything else like that. That leaves it open for us to invite as many people, could be open to the
Yeah.
public. It should be open to the public.
Is that? We're not doing anything. Yeah.
We're monitoring the town's progress, you know, with the town plan. I mean, I feel like it's our job. I assume the planning commission has already started, but it's our job to be pushing for the you know, funding for in a reserve fund for water and wastewater projects.
I'm stopping myself. from
That's not in
saying-
our purview.
Well,
Sure it is. We brought it up.
brought it up.
Well,
We did, but what's the fund for? Is it gonna be for affordable housing, or is it just for, the town should have money because shit happens?
No, the town
I
has
think the
about
money is-
9, the town has about 9 reserve funds now for specific purposes. And what we said last year, and we raised it, our committee raised it, was that the town should have a reserve fund and be accumulating funds for water and wastewater projects. We have funds for, we're accumulating funds for road projects and conservation projects, and, you know, there's a long list of reserve funds.
yeah, so Eric's got that in there. I mean, Eric wrote, allocate specific funds to support and invest in the wastewater systems for the 3 town centers in the
I understand
commercial
that, but
district.
I'm looking at what we're saying we're gonna do. This is an example of something that we need to be doing right now.
Okay,
Who's
so
we? Who's we?
The housing committee, somebody needs to be advocating.
Yeah, but that's what, I mean, we're still working on Eric's template there, and he is advocating, the AHC recommends that the select board allocate specific funds to support and invest in wastewater systems. You guys are saying the same thing. You're just a touch more specific in mentioning a reserve fund, but allocating specific funds kind of says the same thing, right? It's like, it's gotta be in the budget.
Okay, yeah,
well, I want to come back to this section because I don't.
I'm prepared to
Understood.
concede the point. However, we're now working on a list of what we're going to be doing, as opposed to before it was something we recommended. So, yeah, I'm willing to concede the point. As long as we do it.
That covers the money for the infrastructure. As you've just written it.
Okay. So this is what we're agreeing to. What I'm confused about here is this kind of. Having completed the next steps towards meeting the goal from our housing community Jericho require action from the select board. The AHC recommends that the select board.
We said recommendations for action. Are you gonna do it or not?
Support and invest in wastewater systems for the 3 town centers. Okay, so this isn't, sorry, my initial reading of this was a list of demands, but it's not. It's a list of the AHC recommends that the select board.
I don't think we're in a position to demand.
I agree. But the way we were talking earlier was like, we're not gonna do anything but this until yada, yada. Okay, so yeah, rereading this, I'm comfortable with it. Create a revolving lending fund to be used exclusively for single.
My idea there was is if the town can put together a pot of $40,000-$50,000, gets lent out to somebody who's gonna convert part of their house into a secondary ADU, great, pay us back over the time, that whatever amount of time it is. Out of the rent you get or whatever it is. And that'll make it possible for people who have less means to subdivide their home to do so.
Is this something that? Have we recommended this before?
We've
Right.
talked about it.
I don't know if we've actually recommended it though.
I don't know whether we have either, but I'm happy to have it in there. Why not? Okay,
The nice thing is that doesn't have to be a lot of money either.
Well, the thing is, like, in thinking about the number of, we're getting off topic. The number of houses whose, in the village centers, whose septic systems are about to fail and are gonna need mound systems, and it's gonna be $40,000 to $50,000, and helping those people out. I think, in my mind, the biggest recommendation here is a full-time staff position who is charged with identifying funding sources and, half their time maybe with identifying funding sources and grant programs for the town, but also for individuals who are about to be screwed like those. And then the other half of their time project managing some of these bigger things. But
I'm not sure there's enough demand or need for a full-time person to do that in Jericho at present size, but maybe.
we had some language. That I can copy. Okay. And then the HC will hereby reduce frequency of meetings and scope of work.
Until otherwise instructed by the select board.
And that leaves us open to changing our minds in a year when we have some great idea or we have some new hot shot who is full of energy and okay. If I spruce this up, do folks feel comfortable with where we've landed and with delivering this to the select board?
Yeah, absolutely. And feel free to send it around for wordsmithing.
Okay. So how about I'll make a motion because I never do. I'll make a motion to approve with minor edits this letter to the select board outlining
Let's add one other thing at the bottom.
mhm.
The Affordable Housing Committee would appreciate a response from the select board, an agreement to our directions, or let us know you got this, let us know you agree with it, kind of thing.
Okay. I may come up with a better word, but I'll circulate it to everybody. Yeah, so I move that this letter with some minor edits be approved for delivery to the select board on behalf of the Affordable Housing.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? You good? Yeah, okay. All right. So let's then talk about the next meeting, meaning when we should meet next. And Frederica, did you send the we're here, it's only 8:30. Did you send the
I sent both of the DRB things I worked on to your SJ address.
It's not an attachment, it's just what's in the document here.
It's just in the document, yeah, it's not an attachment. I wrote it right into it.
Sounds good. I'm gonna share my screen so everybody can see it.
Which one are you starting with?
Do this, and then we'll talk about next meeting.
They were different, they were very different. Neither of them had an HOA, so the HOA language was just theoretical, but could be used.
Got a gazillion tabs open and who knows? Okay, now let me share.
Random question.
Yeah.
Has anyone, or maybe I missed the conversation about the select board potentially being leadership for this committee? And we talked about that at one point.
We had talked about that at some point, or I had proposed that at one point.
Yeah.
And that's something that we could certainly push for. And is also gonna need to be something that, they want to do. But it's a good point. Is that something that we wanna recommend or advocate for in the letter?
I just honestly think that, having watched select board meetings and the frequency at which they occur, that I find it unlikely that they're gonna want to add another assignment, any one of
Yeah.
them.
That's right. Especially with only 3 of them.
I agree with that, although I will say that when I look at other towns, I mean, I like reading the agendas and the minutes of other towns. And the ones that get things done have one of two characteristics, either a go-getter town manager or a select board that gets personally involved in the major priorities. And Shelburne, just passed their wastewater project by a wide margin. And this was a project that the select board just kind of told the town manager to do, from what I can tell. I mean, the town manager presents it to the select board and then presents it one week and then presents it to the public the week after. And found the financing, really kind of did the whole thing. And then up in Montgomery, which has made extraordinary progress on wastewater, the water and wastewater, or the water commission, which is doing the wastewater, has either all of the select board on it or most of the select board. And the select board discusses wastewater at every meeting. I mean, I haven't checked in the last month or two, but for the 2 years where they started from scratch and basically got it to the point where it went to the public, for a bond vote, the select board was doing it every week. And it was their project. And the tendency in our town is to form when something important comes up or something that may require effort or work or something, we form a committee. I mean, I was really afraid that at the last select board meeting, the woman speaking from the state was recommending that they form a committee to take on wastewater, which is exactly how our town kills projects. All speaking towards the idea of asking, getting someone from the select board to join the committee. I mean, this is the priority in the town plan. It was spoken about extensively in every chapter, not just a housing chapter, but every chapter as being a priority. Jericho's median age is 30% higher than the median age of Bolton, which allows starter homes. It's 30% higher than Colchester, which allows starter homes, and it's 30% higher than South Burlington that allows starter homes.
Sorry, I decided I'm gonna share it in a Word document so we can edit it.
But,
Yeah.
you know, I was just looking at it, the one I sent you doesn't have the graphics in it.
Mm.
I, it's not like it doesn't come across like this, and I think the better model is the Governor Peck one anyway.
Okay.
So did I send you, I sent you the Governor Peck one too, right?
Um,
I sent that right before, there, you got 2 emails from me.
oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, just
Okay.
pull up the first one. It's easier to go and edit, and it has more, like more of the format that I think would be useful for us.
Do you have it? Maybe it's easier if you just share it.
I do.
The other thing I was just gonna share quickly, actually, is something that we had started to put together. Which was a kind of a list of kind of recommendations for crafting an HOA. The reason I bring this up is because it has some language that maybe is useful. And then there was also this kind of checklist or list of recommendations that we were in the process of arguing about. And I don't know if that's helpful for you, Frederica, or not.
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. I can incorporate those in a more like structured response.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. You should be able to share.
All right. So this is the Governor Peck one, which was a large PUD with eventually 17 lots. And the structure, which is kind of what what we're talking about now, is like first is a summary of the proposal. And then, you know, in particular parts of the proposal that speak to potentially affordable housing. So in this case, that was the density bonus. And I wrote down all the conditions that can apply for a density bonus, because I thought that was interesting. And then the next thing was an assessment. You know, so the first one was a summary, then the assessment. And that's where the NOAA, the naturally occurring affordable housing criteria, came in really useful to see whether any of that was going to be naturally occurring affordable housing. And then finally recommendations, and the recommendations
I think what you're sharing is not what you think you're sharing.
Break.
You're sharing your inbox. Or no, your sent box. There we go.
Yeah. So here's the structure. Summary, assessment, recommendations. And the assessment contains the NOAA criteria, and the recommendations, in this case theoretical, because we did not have HOA language, included basically what you just showed me, except stuff that I could remember offhand, what that should not be in an HOA. So I can, you know, so that would be the format. And if you agree with this format and the kind of roughly the content, then I could use that and just then send it around, I guess. I don't know how that works with open meeting law, because we don't, these were super late. We want them to be a little more timely going forward, to maybe make an impact. So we wouldn't have to want to wait for quarterly meetings.
Let's move to approve these now. And then an action item at our next meeting could be a blank template that we rubber stamp and approve.
So we should approve this to form, but not the content.
Do we want to, yeah, if we do that, then we're good to go.
Yeah.
We just we can't change it.
We can always amend it.
I guess that's true. Okay, let's do that.
Pending edits, that might still happen.
It's the form, so the headings you have, and what goes in each heading is what we're approving, not the
Right.
content. Just the
Okay.
form.
The structure, okay.
Yep.
And so here's the River Road one where I wasn't quite as organized. But also description of the site plan in this case, and then proposed AHC input for again, the characteristics for potentially missing middle affordable housing, and then concerns or recommendations. So kind of structurally the same as this. This one was a little more organized.
And so this one you're showing us now,
Mhm.
which is more concise and is more concise, here's the points. I will move we approve that as the form that we use when reviewing DRB applications or any other large zoning any other PUDs or other such developments,
Mhm.
subdivisions and anything else.
Large. Can we
I
add
guess
to
literally any
that?
subdivision application.
And can we add to that maybe any, I don't think relevant is the right word, HOA bylaws?
Well, that's covered in one of the assessments right there, right?
It's down here, the HOA language. I mean,
Yeah, but the wording that we have now doesn't apply to a private road being taken over in that HOA review.
That would be a different type of review than that would be.
that's a different review, yeah.
Okay.
So this would be a review of any subdivision application. And the other one would be a review of any application to surrender a private road or to deed a private road over to the town.
Okay, so you're making a motion to approve this form letter.
This form
This
for reporting
form.
on PUD applications. PUD or other subdivision applications.
Okay. I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Aye.
Thank you. Awesome.
Then we would need to develop a second format for a HOA that wants to deed its road over to the town.
Okay. If that's something that
Eric, I don't think we're gonna need to do that. The town is about to pass a road policy which says that we're not gonna take over the roads for any neighborhoods that are not subject.
they just said that they need someone to review and determine whether or not it meets the criteria that they're setting.
So they're
Uh,
passing it up to us or somebody else like us.
Well, they
Or
need
someone in
to,
the
they
town
want
administrator.
to, and they don't know who to pass it off to. And I'm saying we should be the ones to do that. We should be
town
the
administrator.
we should be the first draft that then the zoning administrator
okay,
or the town administrator checks.
Yeah, that's gonna be a really easy job. I'm happy to do it.
Cool.
Well, that's the job, but we need to write a resolution that says we're gonna do that.
Yeah, so the next meeting, we can hash that out and approve a form or a template for that.
Right. And that's actually gonna be fairly simple because basically we're gonna say, does the deed match the town policy?
Does the HOA match the town policy?
That's not what I said. That's what I meant to say.
Well, Chuck, you wanna write that and submit it all to us and we can approve it?
Our job is to make sure that the HOA matches the town
As a
policy.
resolution, what what are we doing? What's the resolution there?
Let's,
That we
A
will,
motion? You mean a motion?
at the request of the town, well, it's actually part of the DRB process. It's making sure at that point
Is
that
it the DRB that does this, or is it just the select board?
they need
no
to
one
be,
does this.
No one
at that point,
Is
that point, they should be aware of whether the HOA is gonna prevent the town from taking over the road.
That works
that's
for
a
new
different-
ones, but if we're looking at an existing development as
Right.
private road,
Right, there's two jobs.
case like Walnut.
Two different things, but Chuck, that is a good point for Frederica.
Yeah, I can add that in.
And there's no enforcement. It's just a matter, well, for none of these really, but that's a reminder like, hey, make sure you review the road policy if your hope is that your development the road will be taken over by the town.
Yeah, and once
Frederica
that,
had a mention of that in the review of the HOAs for exclusionary limits, which is what the road policy says. If you have an exclusionary HOA, you can't give us the road.
well, it doesn't say that
The intention is to say that, from what I understand of it.
And once the policy does exist, you can point to it and or use that exact language, but that's a good point. Okay. So any other business before we talk next meeting?
No.
Great. So next meeting, I suggest that we do not meet in December. Unless someone feels otherwise or there's a need.
No, I mean, if we do it more quarterly, then I think we're coming up to February, and then in February, we have to kind of think about new members, as you said, right? Because
Yeah.
then it's March, April.
So I think the only thing that I want to say out loud, and I don't think that this really matters, is I'm not put it on the calendar. When is the next? It's January 2023. Step 2 of the new town meeting. I should know this.
2024, 2025 would be the dates.
I think January 23rd.
That's Thursday.
Yep. So the new town meeting is a 3-step process. There was a big ideas kickoff meeting where folks could tell the select board, this is what our priorities are. This is what we want you to think about when you put the budget together. In January, I think it's January 23rd. There is a meeting that will be almost exactly like the town meeting that you're used to, where the select board will have put a draft together and we'll go through the budget line by line and people can ask questions and make amendments. I don't think that there's anything that we as a
January
committee.
23rd is the next meeting.
Thank you. I don't think there's anything that we as a housing committee need to think about for that. If there's some kind of tabling or something, I have a bunch of our posters and I'm happy to just put them up. So then if we want to meet, if we want to touch base in February, on February 11th, we could check back in and potentially, that might be a meeting where we might want to invite folks who might be interested in joining the committee to come and chat with us. So that they can be appointed at the start of the terms, which is in March. Does that make sense?
So they would come to a February meeting?
Yeah.
That sounds perfectly timed.
Okay, so let's plan on our next meeting being February 11th. Having said that, can people make a February 11th meeting?
That's where I was just going on my calendar here. Oh man, I'm losing
And
it
today,
here. February.
I can squeeze it in.
So this would be. It's not the 6th. It's the 13th, right? Yeah, it's
No.
looking good.
It's the 11th.
The 11th of, oh, I'm looking at 24. Darn, that just won't work. The 11th looks good too, I think.
Okay,
Yep, that looks good.
next meeting is February 11th. I'm gonna circulate the letter that we just put together. If you have not content edits, but if you have kind of wordsmithing edits, I'd say get them back to me by Monday. And then I will send it to the select board. Well, I'll send it to Paula to give to the select board. I'm hesitating because I'm wanting to know if you all feel like this is a letter that needs to be delivered at an open meeting.
let's review it all and then we can decide. We've got a December meeting of the select board. And we can convene remote and say, yes, that needs to be done in person, and go there, or convene remote and say this needs to be sent to them and do it that way.
Okay, so when you get me edits by Monday on this letter, how about you tell me in that email with your edits that you're only sending to me and not to the whole group, whether this needs to be done in person.
And you're right, that should be sent to you individually, not collectively.
And then we'll go from there. Okay.
I have one more thing. The content, we agreed on the form of those DRB reviews that I did, but we kind of need to send them back at this point. And so I'm wondering if, I mean, you've seen the content, if you could like take a look at them. I guess I could send them around to see if they sound like we can hand them over to, I don't even know who they go to, DRB or Chris Flynn or whoever wanted them.
Yeah, I would send a copy to Chris Flynn and a copy to the person who submitted the application. The
That's
applicant.
right. Yeah.
And if I didn't give that to you, I have it somewhere.
So is that okay? Does like that everybody takes a look at it and sees if they agree with the content?
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, as long as we're not making big changes, I think we were all on board and we shared it. Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay.
The motion was approved. I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Third, fourth.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
SJ, thank you very much for being a non.
I'm
Chair.
not good at
Yeah.
not.
Interim.
Mm-hmm.